Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 22, season 12 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Today's episode is a fan chat with a musician who's been following along with the podcast now for quite a while and is also a fellow Northern Englishman. Rich Gibson is a singer, songwriter, and musician as a solo artist and the band's Spring and Indigo Slink, which is a fantastic name for a band, as well as being part of three different Wilburys adjacent tribute acts: the Petty Heartbreakers, Ultimate ELO, and the Pretend Beatles. We had a fantastic chat about Rich's background and how he ended up discovering and eventually covering Tom's music, as well as his answers to my 10 questions, which will be online for you to listen to this Friday. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Rich Gibson.
Tom Petty Project. Tom Petty. Hey, Tom Petty Project.
So yeah, I'd love to find out people's origin story. So, and especially with musicians, it's always interesting to find out what music was like in your house. You know, if you had any musical siblings, what your parents were listening to, that kind of stuff. So, what was the music like in the Gibson house growing up?
My mum had a lot of Beatles records, but they were mainly the early ones. So they stopped. I think she got Sergeant Pepper, but White Album, Abbey Road, they were missing Magical Mystery Tour. So she let me play them when I was young, when I was sort of under 10. And she had some singles, and then as we got to sort of about 1980, I started asking for some Beatle records for birthdays and Christmas, that sort of thing. My dad was into cassettes in the car, and he had Elton John, Cat Stevens, Queen of Day at the Races, News of the World. So I was playing that sort of stuff in round about when they came out, the sort of mid to late 70s. So those albums are really evocative of that time, but I'm also very familiar with them because of all the years and listening on the car journeys and so forth. So I started buying my own stuff. I sort of bought singles because, kids haven't got any much money. So I was buying a lot of contemporary. We've many talked about kind of a little bit old stuff there, Beatles and Rolling Stones and stuff, but I was buying like a normal kid, Police, Blondie, The Jam, and so forth. As we got late 70s, early 80s, I was buying, I bought Walking on the Moon when it came out and things like that. So I would say I didn't rebel against anything. I just sort of ran with it. And then I kind of, the Rolling Stones specifically became a bit of my thing because my dad had just got this best of compilation. And then I started getting all the actual albums, probably roughly in classic order. So I was trying to sort of buy, not buying it. But then even in 1980, because I was on holiday, I bought McCartney 2 on a holiday, Stones Emotional Rescue. So those were out that summer, and I was buying them as they came out. And then I basically kept up with those artists. And then if you want to know really about a kind of guitar, I suppose I went on a holiday with my dad to Spain in 1981, and we went around this factory, which was not, I think it's a tourist's guitar factory with hindsight. Now, it looked very impressive to me, and it was a very shiny guitar, but it was awful to play. And I just struggled with this. There was, you may have heard of Burt Weedon Playing a Day. Some grandparent had Day by Burt Weedon, Scott Bobby Shafter was the first track. So I was playing that CF and G7, I think. And, not really inspired. And then September 1982, I moved to high school, and that was a much bigger school. And in there were loads of that. The school was not the school that I would have tended to go to from my middle school. So I had to basically make new friends. But these were kind of friends with older brothers. I'm the oldest, me and my brothers. So I didn't really have an older brother. Although I've got an uncle who's only 3 years older. So he's kind of a bit like an older brother. I spend quite a lot of time with him, and he's quite influential on the music taste as well, with sort of North and soul and things like that he liked. But I got really a racing start. As soon as I got to this school, first birthday, my birthday's in September, I asked for an electric guitar, which is a bit easy to play. And then we started basically playing in a garage band. But within about a year, we did a gig, which wasn't that great, but it's in the youth club where the school was. And I wrote my first song. It was just a bit of a one-off. And then I played with there was two Matts I knew, and they were both very confident. Both had bright red hair. Kind of,
Okay.
they got singled out because they were so obviously distinctive looking, both called Matt and so forth. But they were really confident, and I ended up doing a trio with them. And Matt Hackett, one of the two, got us to play in assembly. So by 1984, we were playing original music to poor school chums waking up at 8 o'clock in the morning in assembly, having to listen to us. But they were appreciative. But that is that sort of gave me a lesson in I know I'll say stagecraft, but just the lack of shame. Sort of mean it kind of came out of my bubble through someone else channeling that. Really,
it's really interesting that I don't know if that was very common really back then, where a school would sort of encourage students to get up and play for assembly. I mean, I went through a Church of England school, so assembly was all about prayers and all that kind of stuff, right? But you didn't really hear. I mean, if you heard about bands, there's always bands at school, right? Someone's always got a band, but it was always kind of you had to go around to their mate's house and they'd be playing in the living room, or they'd be playing in somebody's garage somewhere or something. But to have it at the school, and so was the school quite creative then? Did they have sort of a good sort of contingent of teachers who were sort of supportive of that kind of thing, do you think?
Yeah, I'd say our head of house. So I was in one of the 4 houses, and she was the head of music. So I think she was into it, supportive. And there was a teacher that ran the youth club that was in the sixth form block, and he was very supportive. So we got a gig. I got my first gig there and my second gig there, and so forth. So and then I probably took a break after that. So then it all kind of goes a bit quiet till almost university time, which is maybe 5 years later.
Right.
I'm still playing guitar, but I'm not really doing a lot of gigs. But I mean, I won't talk too much about Tom Petty because I know he's in the questions. I get into Tom Petty about 1985. Basically, Don't Come Around Here No More video and so forth. So, but I saw Queen live in '84. That one of the two Matts was an enormous Queen fan. Just so big, and he'd seen the Hot Space tour in '82. So that was at Ellen Road, Leeds, as well as Milton Keynes, which was on telly. In fact, he watched the Milton Keynes on telly at mine because he couldn't get Channel 4 because he was down in a dip, and Channel 4 was not as good reception. So to come around to mine and watch it live, whenever it was on, we weren't recording it or anything.
Oh, that's
so we watched that. But then so I bought the works, and then I bought Hot Space 2 years after it had come out.
Yeah.
And then, which is why Hot Space has got a special place in my heart, despite it being much derided by me. And then I kept with Queen then as well through that, but that probably dropped off a little bit because some of the later albums I wasn't quite as into, but it was. I'm sadly missed it. I had an opportunity to go to in '86 to the Kind of Magic tour, and I think I was busy or it was too much money, and I just went. And I do regret that because obviously that was the last chance, which we didn't know at the time. So
it's funny it's funny how often we do that though, right? Where when I did it, I mean, the biggest one for me, the biggest regret for me is Sting and Annie Lennox toured, together as on a double sort of headline bill. Must be about 17, 18 years ago now. And the ticket was I think it was like $75 or something Canadian. And I was like, oh man, that's too much. Well, okay, dude, Sting's one of your sort of Mount Rushmore male vocalists. Annie Lennox is your favorite female vocalist. Right. What are you complaining about? Just get the ticket. But I want to go back because you were talking about something that I always like exploring is that you're talking about not having an older brother, or then when you get into because that's so often the way that we are exposed to, especially if it's something like you talked about the Jam, right? The Jam are one of those bands where it's usually an older person who yeah, you listen to that rubbish. Listen to these guys. These guys are the real deal, right? And my friend Birchie was that for me. He was a little. I mean, he was, I don't know, 6 months older than me or something. But his older brother had Blue Oyster Cult and Rush and Van
Right,
Halen and
right.
all these different acts. So we just sit there in front of his mum and dad's record player, just playing record after record after record, right? So I think that idea that music getting passed down generation to generation is always fascinating because it breaks the curation a little bit, right? If you think about it, because the radio's given us one thing. This is what you should be listening to. This is what pop music is. But you get those people who are those influences in your life who give you something that's not that, and it's not on the radio, and it's super cool.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So did you do that for your younger brothers? And did you influence your sibling or siblings?
Yeah, my brother a little bit, and then he was. I mean, he's not much younger than me. He's about 20 months or something like that.
Okay.
So he started getting his own thing. He got very into kind of gothy music, Leeds. I heard a little bit from him for that, So
Yeah.
it kind of worked both ways. But as I mentioned, my uncle, who's only 3 years older than me, he was an influence because he had soul records and unlike some of these, the classic rock as well.
Yeah.
So there was some. It was a mix match. Yeah, a mix up, mash up, or whatever of different influences, which is how I kind of ended up. My auntie, so my mum's younger sister, was really important as well. 1980, I stayed with her in the summer, and she stuck the Velvet Underground. It was live at Max's, which is an unusual kind of semi bootleg LP on, and
Okay.
we had to go to bed. She was like, "It's time," we were only whatever 11 or something, and she said, "Oh, it's your bedtime." So she just put it on, and I heard "I'll Be a Mirror in Pale Blue Eyes" as I'm going upstairs, and I then listened from upstairs to this side, and I just that's incredible. So the next morning, I came down, put it on myself, and then that was a lifelong love affair with Velvet Underground and Lou Reed. So and
Okay.
that's from 1980. So I'm really, that suddenly becomes an absolute touchstone for me that
Yeah.
never left me. And Dylan, that's coming in. She loved Dylan. She loved Springsteen. That was kind of coming in there because she's a big influence because she had what I thought was great taste and quite an
Yeah.
extensive record collection. So there's cool amps and stuff as well. Yeah.
You think about that too, what we're talking about, because it's easy to say and be dismissive of pop music these days. But you think about a lot of the bands we're talking about, they are, I mean, they're, the Beatles are pop and they're all pop, but pop music, it just was more, I wouldn't say better, but more interesting, certainly. And the instrumentation, the arrangements were different. And you would have passing chords, you would have bridges, and you'd have like extended intros, and you could get away with a 4 minute single, and you could have a hit single that's 4 minutes. And I always think that I never know whether it's just me being an old curmudgeon and being in my 50s now that I think, well, pop music sucks now. None of it's interesting. But I'm sure that kids listening to your Taylor Swift and your Sabrina Carpenters and all these artists, they're probably finding the same things we did. You know what I mean? They're probably having that moment, like you said, of listening to Lou Reed, and for me, it was Black Dog, of just thinking, "Oh my God, music was written specifically for me. This is everything. This becomes everything about you." So I do think that I try to temper whenever I think, "Oh, all this pop music these days, it kind of sucks," because there is good stuff out there. You just have to dig a little bit deeper for it, which maybe was the case back in the old days too. We just didn't realize that maybe.
I think the point that you're making about the latest music, if you're talking about some of the using the same chords for the verse and chorus and
Yeah,
not having room for an intro because of and writing by committee with these hits that have got top line writers as they call them on. So they've
yeah,
got. I mean, I once went to a seminar. I'm in the MU, and I went to a seminar. It was free about songwriting, and this guy said, if you write your chord progression, he said you should be prepared to write 3 or 4 different melodies over the top of it. And I was just thinking, well, this chord progression isn't necessarily that special. To me, the special thing is the mixture of the chords with the tune you've put over it. Because loads of
right.
chords are just, loads of songs share similar chord progressions. And it's usually that's the special bit. And I was thinking, well, all those failed attempts, I might change the melody a bit, but I, what I mean? I wouldn't have thought I've written something if I've just written G, C, A minor, and D or something. I wouldn't have necessarily
Yeah,
thought I've written something to then think, oh, I better write 4 different melodies over that. So that was always weird. And then the umpteen lyrics over the top. It's a kind of different kind of craft that I don't really understand that much to persevere with what I might think is not, maybe it's not a very good idea in the first place. So,
Yeah.
so I'm not that into. I'm not dismissing all modern music out of hand, but I think if the market is forcing people to do not what they wish to do, then that's maybe not a good thing. And it's interesting that Petty, which you've alluded to in the show, reached a point where he, he'd always been himself, but he then almost refused to make no concessions to anything that he didn't want to do, including if it denied him a single or a hit single. So,
for sure. And I mean, I was going to ask you then, because you talked about sort of writing a first song really early on. And I will contend to the day I die that you are either a songwriter or you aren't. If you are, you can improve it and you can practice it and you can get better at it. But I don't think you can ever take someone who just doesn't. If that's in you, it's in you, and you can't turn it off. You know what I mean? Like songs will come sometimes when you don't want them to because you're in the middle of something else and you're busy. But they come, songs come. If you're not a songwriter, I don't think you can manufacture that. You know what I mean? And I think that there is an element of, with the sort of the democratization of music distribution online, that kind of stuff these days, there's that sense that anyone can do it. It's like, well, yeah, anyone can sort of plug some words into AI, or you can do, there's all these different things you can do, but that's not really songwriting. It's what Petty talked about with American Idol and those kinds of things, right? Where he was saying that I've no problem with you calling them rock stars, just don't call them songwriters, because they're not. You know what I mean? And it's that idea that, again, it's that crusty old white guy thing, I think, maybe a little bit, but there is a truth to that, I think. I think that the craft of songwriting and that innate desire to tell a story or to create something out of the ether, I think that's a special thing, and I don't think that should be trivialized. I think sometimes it is these days, but
yeah, it's funny because the more I've got, I've played music all my life, but in 2012 I had a day job for 20 years, at civil service actually, but it was a decent job, and I've got a reasonable level in it and so forth, but they needed to get rid of people for efficiency or whatever. So my boss went, and then when she went and got a package, and I was so jealous. I didn't think about it because it was one time before the time. And when she went, she's a few years older than me, but only within 5 years older than me. And I thought, oh, I should have done that. And I thought they'll never do another exercise like that, because they were giving us quite a bit of money as a handout, so it would have just cushioned the. It would. I'm quite risk averse, and it would have enabled me to make the jump. Anyway, they ran one more exercise later that year, and I put in for it, and I got it. Yeah. So it was March 2012. So the end of that financial year. Since then, I've been full time. So that's 13 years full time. I mean, it's done it all my life, but 13 years has been my job. And so I just ratcheted it up, ratcheted everything that I did, but mainly the tribute end of it, but general covers as well. I suppose the sad thing is that I've done less of the original music in this period, because the administration and song things and development of all those things just takes so much time, and then I guess you're not trying to do music all the time. I'm coming out of the other end of it now, where things are kind of in a more of a steady state, and I've done some stuff in the last couple of years, 5 years, more than I've done maybe in the previous 10. Right. So, and I suppose I only embraced, I think, 2 years ago, putting stuff online, because I'd heard all the things that people said about the streaming services and tape and all this, and I just thought, oh, I don't want to do all that. And then a friend of mine said, oh, I've just paid $9.99 and I'll put this album up in perpetuity, and I went, oh, is that all it is? And then that Christmas I just put a load of stuff up. So and then I was kind of into it then, and then suddenly the fact that because even when I was on Bandcamp, which I think is really good because it does pay its artists, I had loads of people tutting because they wanted to do a playlist or share something or just put it on the thing, and they said, oh, do I have to download that, or can I just have to say on this one app? Or I don't want the files on my phone. I just want to, so at least if it's on streaming, you can just say, here's the link. And it does a little bit, I keep saying there's someone in Nigeria or whatever playing something, and it must be an algorithm or something that's just thrown that in, and then you sink or swim, don't you? Because they either go no, or they go, "Oh, it's all right. I'll play one more."
Yeah.
But that you didn't have that before. The only problem is it's like that for everybody. So there's a huge soup that we're all in.
Yeah, there's a lot of competition, right? I mean, and the independent artist these days, you've got to be a songwriter and you've got to be a performer. In a lot of cases, you end up having to record yourself or produce yourself or some sort of mixture of that. Then you've got to be your own PR manager and you've got to be your own booking agent and and the gigs don't pay. And so you're in that stage where if you're doing this, it really is because you love it. First and foremost, it's not with the expectation that I'm going to end up being a millionaire. So one of the, obviously we sort of connected quite a few months ago now, and I know you've been listening to the pod for a while, and I appreciate that. But you're a busy boy musically as a performer, and you've been in you're in a Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers cover band, George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, not no Bob Dylan and Roy Orbison yet. I'm wondering if you've got any plans to complete the set.
I absolutely adore Bob, and Bob and love for Bob and Tom is sort of almost around at the same time, say mid-80s. So I got into probably both in a big way in 85 onwards. And we'll come on to, I saw them both not long after that. So, but that was the problem with Bob and Lou Reed, to my mind, is I'm a real melody man. And although I love Bob and Lou, they're two of my absolute favorite artists. They have got very idiosyncratic ways of singing. So if I do a Bob cover, I can't help tidy up the melody. I can't totally just parody and then just not nail what note it is. And same with Lou Reed. So if I was to just do a cover, I would just nail the note. A bit like when you hear, I don't know, just someone, Judy Collins, she did some Dylan covers. Joe Baez has done them as well, and she just nails what the notes are. Brian Ferry, he's done loads. I mean, in fact, Adele's "Make You Feel My Love," I'm sure, comes from Brian Ferry's version, which is about 2 years before, to turn it into like piano ballad, but with a nailed melody. So I mean, Dylan's suggesting most of those notes, but he absolutely nails them. So if you put Bob or Lou into a tribute and can't resist doing that.
I see what you're saying.
I would find it very hard to just sort of do the thing, and I'd end up probably parodying them too much because all I'd have to go on is that that thing that people
for sure,
having a laugh at Dylan's expense, So I guess that's why I've never done them. Although I love both those songbooks. Petty is just he's probably more pop. He's got, he does talk and drawl now and again, but he's mainly his melodies are nailed. And I think George is, and so is Jeff. Jeff absolutely is nailed. He's super pop. I actually think George, Jeff, is by accident. And they're all set there in the Wilburys, and I love them all. And I actually think having had to sing parts of all of them in various things, I think there's quite a lot of common ground. The way that they've all got really good falsettos. Petty's probably slightly less so. He's probably got a more tenorish voice anyway. But loads of George, when you hear him do like the chorus of Guitar Gently Weeps, he's in his falsetto.
Yeah,
he's just that's how he's got there. Jeff uses a lot of falsetto, so suddenly you find quite low singers that have got access to this wider range, but via those means. So it's not like a McCartney voice where you've kind of got to hit those notes dead hard,
right?
So I wouldn't do a Lennon or a McCartney tribute or a Mercury. I've not got the range, and also couldn't hit the notes that hard, where the way they need to be hit. Whereas these other people are a little bit softer, and So I would talk about Tom too much because, as I say, we've come on to that.
No, we should do that.
How he changed. I mean, he changed, didn't he? He changed from probably on the more tenorish, snarly, aggressive to a little bit more laid back and expressive.
Yeah, definitely.
So you could see I mean, some of that might have been evolution of the voice with age and spoken, but he didn't deteriorate. I loved the second half more than the first vocally, for sure.
Yeah.
But
Well, and I mean that's that thing though that as a working musician yourself, you don't go out there and try and sing the songs in the same key that you could sing when you were 20 because if you do that and you can't hit it, first of all, it's just not going to sound all that good. I mean, it's why like your Vince Neils and your John Bon Jovis, you think, guys, like it's time to wrap it up now. You're not able to do that anymore. So either change what you're singing, change the style that you're doing, the types of songs you write, or detune it, or whatever you need to do to get back into there. But it seems like some guys just can't let go of that. Well, like you said, that's what I love about Petty. He's like, okay, well, my voice is this now. So because my voice is this is what I'll write, and this will really, really suit it. So he's always seemed to be attuned to what he could do and what he was really good, what his high card was, right? It's like I'll always play to my high card. Petty always did that.
Yeah, so I mean, funnily enough, Macus he still does the same keys, doesn't he? But most of his contemporaries, Rod Stewart, people like that, have changed keys. And someone like Joni Mitchell, who had this phenomenal voice, she just really changed how she sung. She did a covers album of her own. Not covers, but she did an orchestral version, a travelogue of her own songs, and was taught real low and smoky with an orchestra and stuff. And again, as Shay playing into that, she goes, "Well, this is what I can do now, so this is what you're going to get." And it had its own merits. When she sang both sides, now that was a particularly powerful one because she was very young when she wrote that song of like wisdom and almost end of life type song, and then singing it many years later with a very lived-in voice that had real power and from that hearing that rendition really.
For sure, yeah. Let's talk about the Petty covers band then, because one thing I'm always sort of curious about is Tom himself. Like if you look at the set lists, there are just I don't know a dozen to 15 songs that you sort of have to play. If you're Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, you kind of have to play these because the people are expecting them. And we're talking, your sort of your American Girls, your Refugees. There's just some songs you sort of almost have to put in your set list. As a tribute act, though, you've got that sort of scope to say, well, either we'll do a first set of all the hits, then we'll maybe stray off a little bit, and then we'll finish with the hits, or we can mix in because we want to bring these different songs that people haven't heard before. So how do you balance when you put a set list together as a tribute band? How do you approach that?
If we play long sets. That's one thing. We play really long sets. So we play. It's usually two 60 minutes at least, maybe with a bit of an encore. So there's room for about 28 songs in that. Right. So I'd say probably 15 or so of what you just described. The trilogy from Full Moon Fever, American Girl, so forth. A lot of those singles. And then I always like some late period stuff, which we sort of never seem to now drop Good to Be King because it's. But I mean, we keep it to the 5 minutes though. We don't do the 13 minutes. Not so good room, So there's Wildfires ones. There's as long as there's that balance, as you say, you can only really rotate half the set tops, but I'd say those big hits are sprinkled through the set. They're obviously backloaded a little bit for both sets, so they can end. One set might end with Running Down a Dream, one might end with American Girl. Don't tend to do American Girl as an encore because it's a bit like skipping Mr. Blue Sky in the Yellow. It's not really an encore because they go, well, you haven't played that song, so you need one to follow. But I always find stuff like You Wreck Me can close a night. That's very so or with them Oh Well, Oh Well and stuff like that. From when Petty did the Fleetwood Mac cover on the 2012. So there's always something you can do afterwards. But
I'll just jump in quickly though. I wonder I've never actually looked this up. I wonder how many rock and roll bands have covered Oh Well. I'll bet you it's all of them. Or more or less, right? Because it is one of the greatest riffs ever written, and Peter Green was just like this legend. It's one of those things. Because when I saw Petty cover it, I'm like, oh yeah, Mike Campbell shreds it, and it fits his voice so well, and he delivers it. It's so cool.
When he says leg, he really stressed the legs are thin though. He had thin legs as well, didn't he? Yeah. So
So you'd say you're your lead vocals as well, right? So you play guitar and lead vocal.
Yeah, my friend Gary, we were both playing guitar, and this is 2011 when we did this. So we played. He was doing some original stuff with me anyway. I was singing the original stuff. We both shared guitar duties, and both bits weaving really, both doing solos, both doing rhythm
Yeah,
bits and so forth. Um, and I think we just wanted to do before the tributes were around, but so Petty was just what's no one doing in the UK that we could actually do a decent fist of, and we started it off. I suppose I didn't. I thought I could probably do it as in vocally, but
yeah,
we just initially started it from a guitar point of view, and then I sort of said, "Well, I'll sing for now, and then we'll have to think about whether we get someone to do it or not." And then I was comfortable with it, but I did feel a little bit to start with, but it was what do we love? So we loved his music. We both loved his music. What's no one doing at the time, and no one was in the
yeah,
UK, and what can we do? So it's because none of the tributes, all the tributes I do, none of them are. I love all the music of them anyway. It's not like I'm doing a function band where I've got to play a load of songs that I
yeah,
really would rather not play, but I must because that's what's required. So I only do tribute to something I could get behind, as I'm already a fan of it.
yeah,
And then I just thought we can do a fairly good fist of this. We're not we were dressing a little bit hats, shades, the odd thing. What we didn't go for wigs with this,
yeah,
and so forth. And it's I didn't want to try and look parody Tom. He's a lot sort of he's quite small guy physically. He's quite very skinny and so forth. And I'm taller and not so skinny as him, etc. etc. Not blonde. So we didn't want to do sort of be disrespectful or start wearing freaky party Amazon wigs or whatever.
yeah,
So we just kind of kept it more to the music thing. Um, but we just fell into it, and then people, it really is niche in the UK. I keep seeing the odd band that's got money behind it, all very connected. Like so, we've been going all this time, maybe
yeah,
14 years or so, and we've just been steady away. So no matter what we do, we can play to 120 people here and there. Sometimes they're paying quite a bit for a ticket in some of their, but it's hard. Even now that I've got ins in various places with, say, an ELO tribute or Beatles tribute, and then I can go,
yeah,
"Ooh, we've got this Petty one, who's different people. Actually, there's no crossover between those things, but I do try and get the other ones in, ones where I think, oh, this is a good venue. And some of them won't have it, or there's another Petty tribute there or whatever. But there keeps being new ones starting in the UK, and then you see them stop because I think they think, that's an unexplored gold mine.
yeah.
I don't think so in the UK. Sometimes they start really big, sometimes they play a couple of big gigs, and then a lot of them go quiet. And I think the market's not there. I don't understand it because the Petty is high. When I saw him as an arena act, and of course his last gig he was playing at Hyde Park. But
Yeah.
I think he neglected. I think he neglected the UK after getting that lift. He hardly played between 92. Was it 2 dates or something between 92 and well maybe four
Yeah.
dates between 92
What
and 2017, something like that.
it's funny. It's funny because I've commented on that before, and I was actually just recording Ultimate Catalog Clash episode
Mm,
on Born in the USA, and Springsteen's the same. Petty didn't really play outside the US, not even in Canada. Like he didn't
mm,
travel, and I know that part of it was he didn't like flying. So
right.
I know that was definitely part of it. But you see this sort of skew from these huge artists, these American artists, where it's almost exclusively playing in the US. So you are going to lose a bit of engagement with your international crowd there, right? If they're not going to concerts and seeing you, they're not connecting in the same way as with just buying the records. And all your fans will still buy the records, but it's not quite the same engagement one to one with those fans if you're not actually standing in front of them playing the songs, right?
We get these. The most common thing that's said to us a Petty gig that's where it's been one where people have maybe it's cheap or it's at a festival or something where people have almost been fooled into being there, so they haven't set out to be there, and
Right.
they've chanced upon us, if you like. They go, that was great. I didn't realize I knew so many songs.
Yeah.
But that doesn't really help you. That doesn't sell the ticket in the first instance,
Right.
does it? Because
Yeah.
it's nice that that's won them over, and maybe they'll come again. But I think there's a difficulty. I didn't know I knew so many songs. So that's the problem. I think in the UK, it's a different thing in America. I know in America,
Yeah.
probably there's loads of tribs, and I think they all do pretty well. But that's a different market, and I'm not there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and he is a very American artist, but not in that sort of chest bumping, rah 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 USA USA. He's not that, but he is very American. And we think about we talk about Americana and folk and sort of that kind of thing. He does have a foot. As much as he's into like the classic rock and roll, he does have his feet in there as well, right? So, and I know that probably was something that was maybe a little bit of a barrier for me when I was younger, at least. And like I've talked about this on the pod, my entry into Petty was the Wilburys, right? Because I was a huge Beatles fan. Of course, I mean, if you're not a huge Beatles fan, I really haven't. I mean, Petty, I can relate. You don't get Petty, fair enough. Or you don't get if you don't like the Beatles, I just don't know what you're listening to. I don't get that. So coming in, it was Harrison for me, and so then, of course, like I discovered Tom a lot later. And living in Canada is, I've just culturally, I've got that context and that background now for it. So I do wonder about that sometimes when, especially with something like Mojo, when he comes out with this album that's, it's kind of a blues record and there's a bit of reggae on there, some other bits and pieces on there, but it definitely is far removed from what an English listener is going to relate to, I think, a little bit. So I always find that interesting that he sort of, again, he's just sort of said, like, we talked about this earlier. At some point, he just says, well, this is the music I want to listen to. So I don't care if Japan and UK and Australia, and that's not really any of my business. The fans who love my music probably will come along with me, and that's enough. Right. So I think there is a stage in these artists' careers where they don't worry about that anymore. And it is sad because then the fans in UK don't get to see them live unless they can afford to travel. But as the artist, you got to think about it too, man, right? When you're just getting into your 50s and 60s, man, do you want to haul yourself all the way over to the other end of the world for 9 months at a time? Like, that'd just be exhausting,
No, it's and they could make the money. They could. I mean, that last tour proved it, didn't it? Apart from that one gig, he could just tour all. He could have toured all the time if he'd wished to. And I guess things are cheaper as well. You don't have to risk putting because he did carry him and Mike especially carried lots of very precious amps and guitars. They used the real stuff on the tour, and I guess again putting that on the plane feels a bit more risky, doesn't it? Than putting it just in a several trucks that are just going around the US. I guess there's a bit more risk, especially if you watch any of those YouTube videos of luggage handling. It'd probably be different for them, I'm sure. But
So you said you got into Petty around 85 then, so we're in that Southern accents phase. And I mean, that really sort of almost accentuates what we just talked about, right? Because Southern accents, well, originally obviously was going to be a concept about the South. And, in England, we have that very romanticized version of Hollywood and America when we're growing up. We're sort of given the pastiche of it. So I'm kind of curious about, like, when that hits and Don't Come Around Here No More is the sort of the complete opposite of that because it's Dave Stewart and it's this big electronic thing. But did you go back straight away and listen to everything up to that, or did you sort of stick with Petty from that point on at first?
I went back very quick. So the video got me into it. My girlfriend at the time, I think she bought the album, and we were hanging around a lot together. I bought my own copy as well, so it's to her credit really. But I see the video, and I did like the Eurythmics at that time. I think they'd done so. What was it? Be Yourself Tonight was around.
Yeah,
so,
which
so
is
Dave
which is their best record, man. That's their best record as far as I'm concerned.
Dave Stewart's is I suppose maybe not cool, but certainly like a pop. But his involvement with Petty. If you come in at Petty cold, the Heartbreakers might have gone Dave Stewart with all those drum machines and stuff, but. If you sort of accepted the Eurythmics, then it's not such a thing. So I was cool with that, and I loved the wah-wah guitar, the sort of sitar, the psychedelia. I love the Alice in Wonderland references. The video was
course.
powerful. And then when I got into it, I absolutely adored Best of Everything. And I still like to think that's amazing. And I still think actually that Roberts, that's then like the band, not then. I didn't know about the band then, but what he did later on with and put Richard Manuel on that track only a year before he died. The horns, it's amazing. And then when we found out, was it with American Treasure or was it the best of they put out afterwards? I think it was the career best of. They added the extra verse in that was taken out before the solo, and actually it was the right move to take it out. I'm pleased they've got a longer version, but it's pruned correctly on the way it came out. But yeah, Dogs on the Run, loved it. Rebels. So there's a lot of the guitar music. I'm still not as keen on Make It Better. Southern Accents itself is gorgeous. Spike's gorgeous. That sounds like the Doors or something. So it's like almost LA Woman era with the electric piano. You know, maybe not vocally, but
I'd never made that connection before. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of good tracks on that. You know, maybe as say Ain't Nothing to Me and Make It Better, or possibly they're the other two Stewart ones, aren't they? And then maybe just not quite as good. So I probably prefer more of his traditional rock. Saw him on TV at Live Aid, and he's doing some of those songs there. I think he did Rebels, did he? I can't remember.
Yes,
but anyway, he's dead good. I like the 12-string. It sounds good. So that album, and then I very quickly went back. I think I went to my local H&V. I can't remember if it was H&V or Virgin, but they had around about that time. They had Hard Promises $3.49 and Long After Dark $2.49. So I bought them because at the time albums was £6 or £7. So this is half price or even a bit less. So on a budget as I was, I bought those two. So I went literally back in order. So literally the album before and then the album before that. And then I think I picked up the first three. And then I just stayed with him. So then I just remained. I got Pack Up Plantation live for Christmas in '85, and then kept. I also like Let Me Up, even though it's got a place in my heart because of because I grew up with it. And the other thing you probably when you haven't got many records, which in the earlier part of your life you've got less, like, unless something catastrophic happens, that's usually you get more. You just accumulate, don't you? Yeah. And you've got more to listen to. So you play records in the earlier part of your life more often than you might do later on. They get you under heavier rotation. So even for its sins of drum machine and whatever, Let Me Up is. I like it. I like loads of it. And it's got some really straight rockers on it. I know it's got a lot of drum machine here and there with like Runaway Trains and stuff, but Jamming Me's a rocker. All Mixed Up's a rocker.
And I think that was always to be when I went through those Southern Accents and Let Me Up, that was my sort of criticism. Who am I sitting in my basement is actually criticizing Tom Petty, but they're just a bit uneven, right? Because they've not quite settled. Dave Stewart comes in. I think those three songs would have worked brilliantly as an EP. And then do the Southern Accents, pursue that theme, because that's a really interesting, there's some really interesting topics there to explore. And then Let Me Up is that reaction to, well, we've just come off the road with Dylan. Let's go in and just try and record it as live as we can. Cool. To the point where you've got Tom calling it the key changes, chord changes, because they're just basically making up the spot. So I love that. I always love it when an artist try something like that and stretches. I'd rather they do that and it fail. We talked about Hot Space earlier, a bit Queen Hot Space. I'd rather they've done that and thought, actually, you know what, it doesn't really quite suit us, or we didn't quite get it right. Let's maybe not. But I still like that they did it. I wouldn't want them to have not done it. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with Petty, because they learn so much. Each of those experiences teaches them, with Southern Accents, it teaches them that we need a producer. Like, we can't do this all on our own. We need someone to come in and help us out with that kind of stuff. Let Me Up shows them that, okay, well, don't chase, we didn't take Boys of Summer. So as much as I love Runaway Trains, maybe that's not exactly, maybe I was right, and that isn't exactly the right sound and the right fit for us. So like I said, that sort of transitionary period, but then we get into Full Moon Fever and everything else on. I think that one of Petty's strengths as an artist, as a musician, as a songwriter, is that he was always aware and taking in that information, absorbing it and processing it, taking what he needed and leaving what he didn't. Which, too many artists, they chase trends, or they just don't. They're always kind of their focus is distracted, and they're not sort of thinking, okay, well, What do I need? What makes my songs better? You know?
Be interesting if the estate gets to do a Southern accents, because we could always get maybe from some of the outtakes, apartment song version around about that time of what that could have been, like a more
Yeah.
realized version of maybe the original intent before maybe the Stewart songs came in and so
Yeah.
forth. It'd be probably quite interesting to see how, a bit like Wild Hours and all the rest, just to see what that might have been,
Yeah.
or as one of the discs. So there's probably
Sure,
notes
yeah.
somewhere out there.
Hope so,
Draft
yeah. I
running
mean,
orders, yeah.
okay, well then let's move. So obviously you do a Jeff Lynne tribute as well then. So were you a Jeff Lynne fan already? Because obviously then when he goes and does the Wilburys and works on Full Moon Fever and Integrated Open, well now you've got them both working together. And those albums again sound very Jeff Lynne. They sound
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Jeff Lynne records as much as they sound like Petty records, right?
Yeah. I was a big ELO fan in the 70s, just loved the stuff. Got the best of, just was exposed a lot. My dad had Out of the Blue, I think.
Yeah.
So I grew up listening to the radio of those songs and not, my parents' stuff. So I loved him. I think in the early 80s, Jeff kind of dropped off the radar really, because there was, after Time, which had Hold On Tight on, and then Secret Messages was that. That's Rock and Roll is King. So it's getting less than them as Here Is the News. If you start getting to 86, these are not really charting.
Right.
And I'm not listening to Jeff at this point.
Yeah.
So I was already a Petty fan and a Dylan fan when the Wilburys came out. So the Wilburys
Yeah.
to me, and a George fan because I love the Beatles, as we described from the start, and George's solo career. I liked. I probably hadn't got all the stuff then, but I liked George as a Beatle. So to me, it was probably those three and Jeff and Roy,
Right.
in terms of what I was most into at the time. Although Jeff, I mean, it's funny because Jeff's songs on the Wilburys are more like his rock and roll stuff that he was doing, like Hold On Tight, because he does rattle. So it's more like a rock and roll pastiche than more of his symphonic pop. So again, it's not my favorite Jeff. I prefer my symphonic Jeff or me I'm the Walrus Jeff than the Hold On Tight version. Give me rockabilly, whatever. So, and Roy was, I mean, Running Scared, It's Over, songs like that were fabulous. I suppose Pretty Woman. I could see Roy, so that it was cool. But I like that album. What I particularly liked about that album, because if you're a Dylan fan, Dylan has done a series of what people would think are just duds. I mean, I bought Empire Burlesque in just shortly after 85. It's when I got to uni, I think. So maybe I bought it just before I went. So I bought that because it was his new album. It was very cheap again, a bargain bin, I think. And then Knocked Out Loaded, 86. That's got a Petty co-write on. Got my mind made up. It's not a good album. It's not a good album. So, and then he does Down in the Groove. Yeah, that's not great. He's doing covers on that. He's doing he does Let's Stick Together, or I can't remember what he's calling it. Let's Work Together at that time. Anyways, it's not. These are not great Dylan albums. And suddenly Dylan, I think in '88, finds his muse, because he's doing Tweeter and the Monkey Man. I mean, I don't know who wrote it, but it's obviously Dylan's doing all. Congratulations. Dylan absolutely dominates the Wilburys one, if you think about it, doesn't he? Because he's probably got more leads than everybody else. I mean, Tom's getting a bit short shrift, because Tom's just doing Last Night, really. I mean, he's got bits of the others, but he hasn't got another song, has he? That's just him.
Not as sort of, I guess when you put it that way.
He's got a little bit in End of the Line. He does the first bits in End of the Line, but George and Jeff are doing the choruses. He's got the odd little bit here and there, but it's not, Roy's got his signature, Not Alone Anymore. Jeff's got Rattled. Bob's got loads. He's got loads. True, yeah. I didn't mind that. I didn't mind it because I was a Bob nut.
But we talk about this all the time as Wilburys fans and as Petty fans and Dylan fans and Harrison, but just the fact that they were all willing to do that. I don't need to be front and center. I'll just play guitar, or I'll do this, or I'll contribute this, because what it says to me is that at the heart and why those guys are not only as successful as they've been in the past, but that they've got the longevity, we still love them, is they all cared about the song first. They cared about the song more than they cared about, their own sort of self-aggrandizement or success or fame or anything. It's about, well, how do we write the best song we can write? And what does that song need? And that's what I love about Petty, Dylan. I mean, maybe less, a little bit so less so Jeff Lynne, because I don't think anyone would necessarily accuse Jeff Lynne of being economical with his arrangements in a lot of cases, right? Like he liked the grandeur and the big thing. But you think about Robertson and Harrison too. I mean, Harry, All Things Must Pass is a very, there's lots of space on that album, and there's lots of like clean, simple lines that Harrison was so good at. So they all care about, like you said, melody, but care about the song. And so that's where I don't think I don't know you'll ever see something, a super group of that level of sort of talent pull something off that's as good as Volume 1 was.
Yeah, I mean, but when Volume 3 came out, which was that 1990? So Roy had died.
Yeah.
But then having extra Tom on that, I liked, because
Cool Dry Place, man. Cool Dry Place is one of my favorite Tom Petty songs.
Yeah. So extra Tom on that. But interestingly enough, that I mean, I think it probably irked Tom, didn't it? Because wasn't Full Moon Fever? I think Jeff's involvement with Tom Full Moon Fever predates
Yes.
the Traveling Wilburys, doesn't it? But because it came out afterwards, it always looks like, oh, you've got Jeff to do your album, and he's probably going, well, I mean, he's cool about it, but I'm sure it was probably frustrating that he thinks he's Wilburizing his sound when he kind of already done that. So yeah, Full Moon Fever was great at the time. Yeah, I mean, I can even love Zombies too, I suppose. Just about, it's not more of it. But yeah, and a lovely nod back to the Byrds with Gene Clark. Although apparently, I think Gene drunk a lot of that money, so it didn't end well for it. So it's like it was you're damned if you do. So he's helped Gene out, but yeah. So I loved that album, and I loved I do love Great Wide Open, but you can see why that would tear the Heartbreakers apart, because they were quite an organic band, and just making them, they're already probably reeling a little bit from Tom's putting Full Moon Fever out as a solo LP, and then he really involving Mike in much, and then a little bit of Howie, a little bit of Ben Moore. So it's tricky, and I can see why Great Wide Open, although they toured it, and I saw that tour as well. So it's, it was great, but where did they go from there? I guess
it's funny, right? Because some bands or certain incarnations of a band do have a life. Like there is, it's the same. People talk about like a failed marriage. Well, sometimes a marriage does have a natural endpoint, and at that point, it's okay to say, we did that. That was that period, and now we need to move on. And I think that by the time with Stan, right, is what that's what we're talking about. When Stan's kind of involvement finishes with the Heartbreakers, it's the right time for both of them to move on and do something else. And it's not like Stan Lynch faded into the background and never did anything again, right? I mean, he was co-writing with Henley, and that's one of the reasons why Henley was as big as he was for so long, is because he had Stan helping him with a lot of those songs. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of split, and obviously as the fans, you always want the band to stay together because you don't want the band to break up. But I think that was ever the thing. But so they move into Wildflowers, and I like, obviously, again, you've probably maybe talk about this on the podcast, but so how old were you? You listened to Wildflowers when it came out. So how old were you when Wildflowers came out then? Early 30s, late?
No, younger.
Oh no, because it was 94, wasn't it? So
94, 20, 25, 26, probably. Yeah.
Right. So there's the question then.
Yeah.
25, 26 years old, you listen to Wildflowers. I'm sure absolutely love it. When you get to your mid 40s or 50s then, and when you go back and listen to Wildflowers, how much does that change? Because to me, and I've said this a million times, people get bored of me saying it, but it is an album for a middle-aged man. It's about a middle-aged man by a middle-aged man, and it just resonates for me differently. I don't think I would have got Wildflowers when I was 23, 24. I think I would have loved it, but I don't think I would have got it.
I suppose lyrically it's got more, maybe it's possibly deep, but I mean, I think it was thoughtful back then. Production wise, melody wise, I loved it because actually I wasn't that keen. I now occasionally go in if I go in a bar or something which has got, they've got some lazy there's various radio stations, 80s radio stations on them. And since there's our videos on loop, like,
Right.
Take My Breath Away, Berlin or whatever, I didn't like it at the time, but now if I watch it from when I was probably 12 or 13, I actually, far from hating it, I actually get a little bit of a comforting nostalgia. It takes me back to being at school or something. And
Yeah.
so, and I think, oh God, that's really of its time. And I like it. I see it as a virtue. And I'm not hating on the 80s as much as I maybe did 10, 15 years ago, because I can see it as a thing. And it's got a style that it really has its own sound. But the 80s really carried on, if we're honest. They didn't really start in 1980 or 1981, because you've got stuff like the Pretenders album as the first two albums that are really great, dry productions coming into the early 80s. And there's other examples, but those are a couple of them. And even Petty, if you're thinking of Long After Dark, it's not, and How Promises are not affected by the 80s, I don't think.
Absolutely not, no.
And then Nevermind, he's still, even though it's 91, he's still quite fizzy. There's still it's still got almost a bit of 80s snare. The snares are quite gated. If you get, I know you're like in In Utero, as do I, but if In Utero suddenly gets very dry and underproduced, and that's just a couple of years later. There's other albums going on at that time, and you get with Petty, you've got, as you get into the greatest hits tracks, Mary Jane, dead organic and sounding, quite classic rock, and then Wildfires. So I loved it at that time for that thing. And there's various songs, especially as you get to the end when you've got House in the Woods and Wake Up Time. I adore them. I just adore that stuff. I love the Cayman aspects of it. And I just thought, what a fantastic album. So I adored it, and I adored the move, and I suppose I wasn't the Stan thing. I just was happy that he was making those records, however he made them. So I don't think I was getting all precious about who's on them.
Right. So then you talked about sort of moving into the tail end of his career too, and I've talked about this lots on the show as well. And maybe I'll frame this as a question then. Do you know of another, let's call it like classic rock, act who sort of moves into that legacy phase of their career once they're past 50 and they're sort of starting to get into the tail end of it? Can you think of another act who sort of kept getting, I just think kept getting better as a band? They kept challenging themselves and had output of the same quality at the tail end of their catalogue that Petty did. Because if you look through, like I said, we just finished wrapping up Echo, but if you go from if you just think about Last DJ, Highway Companion, Mojo, Hypnotic Eye, as the last four albums with the Heartbreakers or Tom, and then the two Mudcrutch albums, you've got 6 albums there that are musically interesting. They've got hooks and there's singles on there that, obviously the time for that kind of music has passed in the mainstream, but if it was back 20 years before, they would have been hits. You've got a band that's still trying to say something and find new ways and new sort of sounds with which to say it. Can you think of anyone else who sort of has that?
Maybe not that's got exactly the same time frame as Tom, because Tom was obviously, by the time he was doing that, he'd been going quite a long time. But I probably would qualify maybe not REM, because I think probably like you, early albums up to the end of Bill Berry's kind of where. So maybe the last albums have got their moments, but they're probably not as good as what came before. I'm a massive fan of the Jayhawks. So they I don't think they've done an album in the last couple of years. Gary Lewis, the lead singer and main songwriter, does solo stuff as well. But they were doing they did outstanding albums from '92. So initially with Rubin's American label, I think they did about 4 albums on that. George Drakelius had a lot of involvement with Rubin's right hand, as it were. And then they kind of broke up for a while in the 2000s, and then they got back together maybe 10 years later. So they've probably been together again now for 10 or 15 years. And the albums they're doing now are every bit as good. So it's just your quality songwriting, singing, the performance, everything is just as good. So as a Stones fan, they're not making they're not remaking Exile necessarily or whatever, but a lot of their albums. I know there's this huge gap, how many years until this most recent one, but a lot a lot of those other albums had from the 90s or whatever, not the 80s. I won't defend them too much, but the 90s. They were good.
Okay.
There's about three on the bounce where I'm pleased they were CD albums because not for skipping, because of the generous time. Because I just know that all those albums are about an hour long, and I just know if they cut them down to 40 minutes, they cut my favorite songs off. You just know it.
Right.
So by leaving them a little bit 15 track, a bit of Wildflowers type length, it meant that they all you could still cherry pick, say 2/3 of a great album. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you're right. Petty's probably the strongest case you could make for complete consistency and at
Yeah.
the peak its powers right to the end. So
Yeah, for sure.
I won't argue.
Yeah, it's funny. The Jayhawks are one of those bands who they come up quite regularly in conversations that I have with all manner of different people, and I still just haven't. I really should go back. I should go back and spend some time with the Jayhawks. Where should I start? What album should I start with?
Sound of Lies, which is so they before that they've got two singers and they kind of co-write Gary Lewis and Mark Olson, and then Mark leaves, and then it's just Gary, and I just think the two before that's the 92's Waiting for the Sun, and then Tomorrow the Green Grass, they're good and they're on the Rubin American label, but then as you get to Sound and Lies, Smile, and Rainy Day Music, I think that's so there's five. They're all American albums, I think.
Okay.
And then they broke up. But then when they got back together again, but you can get from if you listen to Sound of Lies,
Okay.
you would
That's
probably know whether you like them or not.
okay. That's my jumping off point then. Perfect. Okay, well, dude, this has been an absolute blast. Tell people what they should be looking for. You had a single come out, not I think it was March, right? You just released Everything Pure
May,
Fiction.
I think. Yeah, May was it?
Was it May?
Yeah, May. Yeah. So Everything Pure Fiction. That song, yeah. So most of my stuff was put out as a band Spring, which is obviously before that name was come out. So it's not a great name. It's but people who remember it from the small number of people that remember it from back in the day. So quite a lot of the back catalogue is put out as Rich Gibson because my name is truncated to Rich for the purposes of that, which is I'm happy to be called Rich. That's usually what people call me nowadays. Rather than Richard. So Rich Gibson is how I'm down as an artist or whatever musician. Spring, you'll see a lot of the catalogs in that. So if you search for me, you'd see Spring stuff maybe in tandem with it as both artists. But Rich Gibson is a more unusual couple of words than Spring, less generic. So probably look if you would I didn't have a lot of patience. Look, certainly Spotify and things like that. Rich Gibson, but put Spring in as well if you wish. That would see most of the catalog. The most recent single, which was recorded in a day in March, was this Everything Pure Fiction, which has got like a sort of a water tower on the front of it. Is the cover. So I've also done something in the last 5 years as Indigo Slink, and that's with my friend Fee McMillan. She sings most of it, and those songs are co-written as a kind of as the two of us co-wrote those songs. So that's got stuff that you can sense from what I've done before, but with it being 3R fronted and with another person's input in the songwriting, it just twists. I don't normally collaborate very much with people, needs, must, or whatever of it. So it's you could jump off from one and then like the other, or whatever. There's no way between Indigo Slink and Rich Gibson. If you were just on Spotify, it would be like there's nothing that would connect them. I'm not down as a sub artist on that, so
right.
And then just tribute wise, do I mess to say that? Yeah. So the Petty Heartbreakers, cheeky name, but the Petty Heartbreakers is the name of the the Ron Seal name of the Tom Petty tribute band, which plays in the UK. That's got stuff on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. When I do Jeff, it's usually Ultimate ELO. And then when I do the Beatles, it's the Pretend Beatles. And then I do George and that. We do this thing, ELO Beatles Beyond, which is a mixture of the ELO and Beatles. And then I do sort of new wave era 75 to 85 covers as the 3-piece. That's more in Yorkshire as the Flukes. And then in the same kind of area, I do late 60s psychedelia as Corporation Pop. So there's about 5 things to do with covers and trips there. So if anybody's nearby, the ELO and the Beatles, and to an extent the Petty, play nationally. We've done the odd international thing, but we don't mainly we'd need someone to approach us really and sort that out. It's as opposed to us just throwing ourselves into the great wide open.
Very
so
nice.
That's their end of what I have to say on that.